Lisa checked her phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Gate 23B. She looked up at the sign above her head. Yep, still the right place. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she watched other passengers chatting casually, looking like they did this every day. For them, maybe flying was normal. For Lisa, this was huge. Mom, are we really going to fly in the sky? 8-year-old Danny tugged at her sleeve, his eyes wide with excitement and just a tiny bit of fear. He'd been asking the same question all morning, ever since they'd left their small apartment at dawn. We sure are, buddy, Lisa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. She smoothed down his hair, which always stuck up no matter how much she tried to tame it. Remember what I told you about Grandma being sick? We're going to visit her and make her feel better. Danny nodded. Seriously. He loved his grandmother, even though he'd only seen her twice in his short life. Living on opposite sides of the country made visits nearly impossible, especially when every dollar counted. But when Lisa got the call 3 days ago that her mom was in the hospital, she knew she had to find a way. The airport was nothing like what Lisa had imagined. Sure, she'd seen airports in movies, but being here was different. Everything was bigger, louder, and more overwhelming than she'd expected. People rushed past them with rolling suitcases, talking on phones, looking important and busy. Lisa felt small and out of place in her simple jeans and sweater. She'd been working 2 jobs for the past 3 years ever since Danny's father left. Mornings at the local diner, evenings cleaning offices downtown. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept food on the table. Barely. This plane ticket had wiped out her emergency savings, but what choice did she have? Family comes first. Attention passengers, we are now boarding Flight 847 to Denver, the gate agent announced over the speaker. Lisa's heart jumped. This was really happening. She grabbed Danny's hand and their small carry-on bag. She'd packed light because checked bags cost extra money she didn't have. Everything they needed for 3 days was crammed into one old duffel, bag her brother had given her years ago. The line moved slowly. Lisa watched other passengers ahead of them, noting their expensive-looking clothes and confident way of moving through the process. A businessman in front of them was talking loudly on his phone about some meeting. Behind them, a woman complained to her husband about how their first-class seats better have enough legroom, first class. Lisa had only heard about such things. She and Danny would be sitting in the very back of the plane, in the seats that cost the least. She'd spent hours on the airline's website, comparing prices, looking for the cheapest option. Even then, she'd had to use her credit card, knowing it would take months to pay off. Mom, look at that huge plane. Danny pressed his face against the window as they walked down the jet bridge. Lisa had to admit it was impressive and terrifying. How did something so big actually get off the ground? When they reached their seats, Lisa felt a small wave of relief. They'd made it this far. She helped Danny slide into the window seat, watching his face light up as he looked out at the workers loading luggage below. His excitement was contagious, and despite her nerves, Lisa found herself smiling. The middle seat was hers. She'd hoped the aisle seat might stay empty, but as more passengers boarded, that hope faded. A steady stream of people walked past, checking seat numbers, stuffing bags into overhead compartments. Lisa noticed a man approaching their row. He was probably in his late 40s, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt. Nothing flashy, but his clothes looked well made. He moved with a certain confidence that made Lisa think he flew often. Lucky him. Excuse me, he said politely. I believe I'm here. He gestured to the aisle seat. Of course, Lisa said, standing to let him pass. The man smiled kindly at Danny, who was still glued to the window. First time flying? The man asked. Danny. Danny nodded enthusiastically. We're going to see my grandma. She's sick, but Mom says we're going to make her feel better. The man's expression softened. I'm sure you will. Grandmas always feel better when they see their grandkids. Lisa felt grateful for his kindness. So many people seemed annoyed by children on planes, but this stranger was being genuinely nice. She settled back into her seat, finally allowing herself to relax just a little. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Lisa tried to pay attention, but her mind wandered. She thought about her mom lying in that hospital bed 3 states away. The doctor said it wasn't life-threatening, but at 72, any illness was serious. Lisa wished she could be there more often, but life had gotten in the way. After Danny's father left, Lisa had to make tough choices. Moving closer to her mom would have meant finding new jobs, new schools, starting over completely. At the time, staying put seemed like the right choice. Now she wondered if she'd made a mistake. "Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for takeoff." The captain's voice came over the speakers. Danny grabbed Lisa's hand. "Mom, I'm scared," he whispered. "It's okay, sweetie. I'm right here," Lisa whispered back, though her own heart was racing. She glanced at the man in the aisle seat. He was reading something on his phone, looking completely calm. Lisa envied his composure. The engines roared to life, and Lisa felt the plane begin to move. Danny's grip on her hand tightened. Through the window, Lisa watched the ground fall away as they lifted into the sky. Despite her fear, she had to admit it was beautiful. "We're flying, Mom. We're really flying." Danny's fear had transformed into pure joy. He pressed his nose to the window, watching the world shrink below them. Lisa looked around the cabin. Other passengers were already pulling out laptops, reading books, settling in for the flight. This was routine for them. Lisa tried to imagine what that would be like, traveling so often that flying became ordinary. Right now it felt like the most extraordinary thing she'd ever done. The man beside them closed his phone and looked over at Danny. "Pretty amazing view, isn't it?" he said. "It's the best thing ever," Danny replied. "Look how small everything looks," the man chuckled. "I've been flying for years, and I still think it's pretty incredible." Lisa found herself wondering about this stranger. He seemed nice enough, and there was something about him that made her feel safe. Maybe it was just his calm demeanor, or the way he spoke to Danny like he mattered. Whatever it was, Lisa was glad he was sitting next to them instead of someone rude or impatient. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Lisa finally felt herself beginning to relax. They were really doing this. Against all odds, she was taking her son to see his grandmother. It had taken every penny she had, and she'd have to work extra shifts for months to recover financially. But they were here. Sometimes, Lisa thought, you just have to have faith that things will work out. Looking at Danny's excited face pressed against the window, she felt like maybe they would. The first hour of the flight had been peaceful. Danny was still glued to the window, pointing out clouds and asking Lisa what different shapes looked like. She was starting to think this whole flying thing might not be so bad after all. The man in the aisle seat had been quietly reading, occasionally smiling at Danny's excited observations about the world below. But that peaceful feeling didn't last long. It started with loud laughter from somewhere behind them. Lisa glanced back and saw a group of 4 men, probably in their 30s, who looked like they'd been drinking before the flight even took off. One of them was holding a small bottle, the kind you buy at airport bars. Airport security must have missed it, or maybe they'd bought it after security. Either way, they were getting louder by the minute. "Hey, look at that flight attendant," one of them said, way too loud for an airplane. "Now that's what I call in-flight entertainment." Lisa cringed. She hoped Danny wasn't hearing this, but he was still focused on the window, thankfully. The man beside them glanced back at the group, and Lisa noticed his jaw tighten slightly. At least she wasn't the only one who found their behavior inappropriate. The flight attendants were busy serving drinks in the front of the plane, so they hadn't noticed the disruption yet. Lisa hoped someone would say something soon. The men were getting more obnoxious by the minute, making crude jokes and laughing like they thought they were the funniest people on earth. "Danny, want to work on your coloring book?" Lisa asked, pulling out his small backpack. She wanted to keep him distracted from what was happening behind them. "Okay, Mom," Danny said, finally turning away from the window. He pulled out his book and crayons, spreading them carefully on his tray table. That's when things got worse. Well, what do we have here?" one of the men said, clearly talking about Lisa and Danny. "Looks like somebody's traveling solo with Junior." Lisa's stomach dropped. She tried to ignore them, focusing on helping Danny with his coloring. Maybe if she didn't react, they'd get bored and find something else to focus on. I bet I know what happened there, another voice chimed in. Baby Daddy probably took one look at that situation and ran for the hills. The other men laughed. Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She glanced around, hoping other passengers would say something, but everyone seemed to be pretending they couldn't hear. The businessman who'd been on his phone earlier had put in earbuds. The woman across the aisle was suddenly very interested in her magazine. Mom, why are those men being mean? Danny whispered, looking confused and a little scared. Just ignore them, sweetie, Lisa whispered back. Keep coloring your dinosaur. It looks great. But the men weren't done. If anything, they seemed encouraged by the lack of response from other passengers. Hey, lady, one of them called out loud enough that half the plane could hear. You know what your problem is? You need a real man to show you how it's done. Lisa's hands were shaking now. She pressed the call button for the flight attendant, but no one came. They were probably still busy with drink service up front. She felt trapped, stuck in a metal tube with nowhere to go and no one to help. Leave my mom alone, Danny suddenly said, turning around in his seat to face the men. His little voice was brave but shaky. Ooh, looks like Junior's got some fight in him, one of the men said mockingly. That's cute, but you should teach your boy some manners, lady. Kids should be seen and not heard. Danny, turn around, Lisa said firmly, putting her hand on his shoulder. The last thing she wanted was for her 8-year-old to get involved in this mess, but she was also proud of him for trying to defend her. The man in the aisle seat had stopped reading completely now. Lisa could see him watching the situation, but like everyone else, he wasn't saying anything. She couldn't blame him. Who wants to get involved in someone else's drama on an airplane, you know what I think? The loudest of the group continued. I think you need someone to show you what you've been missing. A real man who knows how to treat a woman right. The comments were getting more inappropriate by the minute. Lisa looked around desperately for a flight attendant, anyone in uniform who could help, but the cabin crew was nowhere to be seen. Mom, I'm scared, Danny whispered, his coloring forgotten. That's when Lisa's patience finally snapped. She turned around to face the men. Could you please keep your comments to yourself? There are children on this plane. Big mistake. Oh, she speaks, one of them said with fake surprise. And she's got attitude too. I like that in a woman. Maybe she needs someone to teach her some respect. Another added. Lisa turned back around, her heart pounding. She'd made it worse. Now they knew they were getting to her, and men like this fed off that kind of reaction. The harassment continued for another 20 minutes. Comments about her appearance, her parenting, her personal life. Suggestions that made her skin crawl. All delivered with the kind of laughter that said they thought this was all just harmless fun. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one said a word. The unspoken rule seemed to be, mind your own business and hope it doesn't escalate. But it did escalate. Hey, gorgeous, one of the men said, and Lisa felt something touch her shoulder. She spun around to see one of them leaning forward, his hand still extended. Why don't you come back here and sit with us? We'll show you a good time. Don't touch me, Lisa said firmly, pulling away from his reach. What's the matter? Too good for us? The man's tone had shifted from playfully obnoxious to something darker. Come on, don't be like that. Danny started crying, not loud sobs, but quiet tears that broke Lisa's heart. This was supposed to be an adventure for him, his first time flying. Instead, it was turning into a nightmare. Please stop, Lisa said, hating how small her voice sounded. You're scaring my son. Maybe your son needs to see how a real man acts, the leader of the group said. He was clearly the drunkest of the four, and the most aggressive. Maybe that's his problem. No father figure to show him the ropes. Lisa felt tears stinging her eyes, not from sadness but from pure frustration and anger. Where were the flight attendants? Why wasn't anyone helping? How was this happening in 2024, on a commercial airplane with dozens of witnesses? She looked at the man beside her, hoping maybe he would say something. He was staring straight ahead, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. His hands were gripped tightly on the armrests of his seat. "I want to go home, Mom," Danny whispered, through his tears. "I know, baby," Lisa whispered back. "Just a little longer, okay? We'll be with Grandma soon." But as the men behind them continued their harassment, getting bolder with each passing minute, Lisa wondered if they were going to make it through this flight at all. She'd never felt so alone, so helpless, so completely at the mercy of strangers, who seemed to have no mercy at all. The worst part wasn't even what they were saying to her. It was what this was doing to Danny, her sweet, innocent boy who still believed the world was mostly good. How was she supposed to explain this to him? How could she protect him when she couldn't even protect herself? Something had to give. This couldn't continue for another 2 hours. But trapped at 30,000 feet, with nowhere to run and no one stepping up to help, Lisa felt like she was completely on her own. She had no idea that was about to change. Lisa was at her breaking point. Danny had stopped crying, but he was curled up against her side, still scared and confused. The men behind them showed no signs of stopping. If anything, they seemed to be enjoying themselves more as they realized no one was going to intervene. "Come on, sweetheart," the ringleader called out again. "Don't be shy. We're just trying to be friendly here." Lisa closed her eyes and tried to think of what to do. She could try to find a flight attendant, but that would mean leaving Danny alone with these men nearby. She could try to move seats, but the plane was full. She felt completely trapped. That's when something unexpected happened. The man sitting beside her, who had been quietly observing everything, slowly stood up. There was something different about the way he moved. It wasn't rushed or angry like Lisa might have expected. Instead, he moved with a calm, deliberate confidence that immediately caught everyone's attention. He turned to face the group of men, and Lisa noticed something change in the atmosphere of the entire section. It was like when a teacher walks into a noisy classroom and suddenly everyone knows it's time to pay attention. The man didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at each of the 4 men in turn. His expression wasn't angry or threatening. It was something else entirely. Something that made Lisa think of her old high school principal, the one everyone respected without really knowing why. "Gentlemen," he said finally, his voice quiet but somehow carrying clearly through the cabin, "I think we need to have a conversation." The drunk man who had been leading the harassment looked up at him with a smirk. "Oh yeah? And who are you, her boyfriend? Her knight in shining armor?" The standing man didn't react to the taunt. He simply stepped into the aisle and moved closer to their row. "I'm someone who believes in treating people with respect," he said in that same calm tone. "Especially mothers traveling with their children." Lisa watched in amazement as the dynamic in the cabin shifted completely. Other passengers who had been pretending not to notice were now openly watching. The businessman had taken out his earbuds. The woman across the aisle had put down her magazine. "Listen, buddy," one of the other harassers said, trying to sound tough. "This isn't your business. We're just having a little fun here." "Fun?" the man repeated, his eyebrows raised slightly. "Is that what you call frightening an 8-year-old boy? Making his mother feel unsafe?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "I have a different definition of fun." There was something about his voice that made everyone listen. Lisa couldn't put her finger on it, but this stranger had a way of speaking that commanded respect. It wasn't loud or aggressive. If anything, the quieter he spoke, the more powerful his words seemed. The drunk ringleader stood up, clearly not liking that someone was challenging him. "Look, old man, maybe you should mind your own business before you get yourself in trouble." That's when Lisa saw something that surprised her. The standing man actually smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile that suggested he'd heard that threat before and wasn't particularly impressed by it. "You know," he said, taking another step closer, "in my line of work, I've dealt with a lot of people who think intimidation is the answer to everything. Men who believe that being loud makes them strong. Who think that picking on people who can't fight back makes them tough." He paused, and his voice dropped even lower. "They're usually wrong." Lisa noticed that the man's posture had changed slightly. He wasn't aggressive. but there was something in the way he carried himself that suggested he was very comfortable with confrontation. More comfortable than the drunk men who had seemed so confident just moments before. "What's your line of work?" one of the harassers asked, but his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. "Let's just say I'm trained to handle difficult situations," the man replied. "And this definitely qualifies as a difficult situation." The lead harasser looked around at his friends, probably hoping for backup, but Lisa could see that they were having second thoughts. The alcohol-fueled confidence that had carried them this far was starting to fade as they realized they might have picked the wrong fight. "Look, we were just joking around," one of them said weakly. "No harm done, right?" The standing man turned his attention to this speaker. "No harm done?" he repeated quietly. "That little boy over there was crying because of your jokes. His mother has been terrified for the past half hour because of your behavior. You think that's no harm?" Danny peeked out from where he'd been hiding against Lisa's side. Even at 8 years old, he could sense that something important was happening. The scary men weren't laughing anymore. Instead, they were looking uncomfortable and unsure of themselves. "We didn't mean anything by it," another one muttered. "What you meant doesn't matter," the man said firmly. "What matters is the impact of your actions, and your actions have been completely inappropriate." Lisa found herself holding her breath. She'd never seen anyone handle a situation like this before. The stranger wasn't yelling or making threats. He wasn't trying to start a fight. Instead, he was using his presence and his words to completely change the power dynamic in the situation. "Here's what's going to happen," the man continued, his voice still calm, but with an edge of authority that left no room for argument. "You're going to return to your seats. You're going to keep your comments to yourselves for the rest of this flight. And you're going to apologize to this lady and her son for disturbing their trip. We don't have to do anything you say," the ringleader said, but even he sounded less confident than before. The standing man stepped closer, close enough that only the harassers could hear what he said next. Lisa couldn't make out the words, but whatever he said made all 4 men go very quiet very quickly. Their faces went pale, and suddenly they were all looking anywhere except at him. "I think we understand each other," the man said in his normal voice, stepping back into the aisle. One by one, the 4 men mumbled apologies. They weren't enthusiastic apologies, but they were apologies nonetheless. The ringleader looked like he wanted to say something else, but one look at the standing man's calm, confident expression seemed to change his mind. "Sorry about the noise," one of them said to Lisa directly. "We'll keep it down." Lisa nodded, still too stunned to speak. In the span of 5 minutes, this stranger had completely turned the situation around. The men who had seemed so threatening and unstoppable just moments before were now sitting quietly in their seats like scolded children. The man returned to his seat beside Lisa, settling back in as if nothing unusual had happened. He picked up his book and opened it to where he'd left off, as calm as could be. "Thank you," Lisa whispered, finally finding her voice. He looked over at her with a gentle smile. "No thanks necessary. Everyone deserves to travel in peace." Danny, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, tugged on the man's sleeve. "Mister, are you a superhero?" The man chuckled softly. "No, son. I'm just someone who believes in doing the right thing." "Well, you're my hero," Danny said seriously. Lisa felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. The rest of the flight stretched ahead of them, but for the first time since boarding, she felt safe. She still didn't know who this man was or what he did for a living, but she was more grateful than she could express that he had been sitting in the seat next to theirs. As the plane continued toward their destination, Lisa couldn't help but wonder, what kind of person had the confidence and skill to handle a situation like that so effectively? Little did she know, she was about to find out. After the confrontation, the cabin felt completely different. The 4 men in the back had gone silent, occasionally whispering to each other, but keeping their voices so low that no one could hear them. Other passengers were slowly returning to their books and phones, but Lisa could still feel the tension in the air beginning to fade. Danny had perked up considerably. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by curiosity about the man who had stood up for them. He kept glancing over at their seat companion, clearly wanting to ask more questions but not quite sure if he should. "It's okay, buddy," the man said, noticing Danny's sideways looks. "You can talk to me. What's on your mind?" "How did you make those mean men stop being mean?" Danny asked, his 8-year-old directness making Lisa smile despite everything they'd just been through. The man closed his book and gave Danny his full attention. "Well, sometimes bullies act tough because they think no one will stand up to them. But when someone does stand up to them, they realize they're not as tough as they thought they were." "Are you really strong?" Danny asked, eyes wide with admiration. "Strong comes in different ways," the man explained patiently. "Sometimes being strong means lifting heavy things, but sometimes it means standing up for what's right, even when it's scary." Lisa watched this interaction with growing amazement. This stranger was taking time to actually talk to her son, not just brush him off like so many adults did with children's questions. Danny was hanging on every word. "What do you do for work?" Danny continued his questions. "Mom says I shouldn't ask grown-ups about work, but I'm really curious." The man glanced at Lisa with an amused smile. "Your mom is very smart. It's usually good advice. But I don't mind telling you that I work for the government. I help keep people safe. Like a police officer?" Danny's excitement was growing. "Something like that," the man said. "But tell me about you. What do you want to be when you grow up?" Danny's face lit up. "I want to be a pilot. I want to fly planes just like this one, but maybe even bigger ones. Mom says it's really hard to become a pilot, but I'm going to study really hard." "That's a great dream," the man said seriously. "And your mom is right, it does take a lot of hard work. But you know what? I think you've got what it takes." Lisa felt her heart warm at his encouragement. So many people dismissed children's dreams as just phases, but this man was treating Danny's aspirations with genuine respect. "Have you ever flown a plane?" Danny asked. "I have, actually. Many different kinds of planes." The man's eyes took on a distant look. "There's nothing quite like it. The feeling of lifting off the ground, seeing the world spread out below you. It's pretty amazing." Danny was practically bouncing in his seat with excitement. "Really? What kind of planes? Big ones? Fast ones? All kinds," the man said with a chuckle. "Maybe someday I can tell you more about it." Just then, a flight attendant appeared in the aisle beside them. Lisa recognized her as the head flight attendant who had made the safety announcements earlier. "Excuse me," she said to Lisa quietly. "I understand there was some trouble earlier with other passengers. I want to apologize that our crew wasn't available to help immediately. We were dealing with a situation in first class." Lisa was about to respond when the man beside her spoke up. "Actually, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" he asked the flight attendant. The woman nodded, and they moved a few steps away. Lisa couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but she saw the flight attendant's eyes widen slightly, and she kept glancing back at Lisa and Danny. After a few minutes of quiet conversation, the flight attendant returned with a bright smile. "Ma'am, we'd like to offer you and your son an upgrade to first class for the remainder of the flight. We have 2 seats available, and we want to make sure the rest of your journey is comfortable." Lisa was shocked. "Oh, I couldn't possibly accept that. Those seats must cost—" "It's already taken care of," the flight attendant said warmly. "Please, we insist. Let me help you gather your things." Lisa looked at the man beside her, confused. "Did you—" He just smiled mysteriously. Sometimes good things happen when they're needed most. As they prepared to move to first class, Danny was practically vibrating with excitement. He'd never experienced anything like this before. Neither had Lisa, for that matter. She felt like she was in some kind of dream. "Wait," she said to the man. "Are you coming with us?" "I'll be fine here," he said. "You two enjoy the extra space. Danny, remember what we talked about. Keep working toward that pilot dream." "I will," Danny promised. "Thank you for being so nice to us." As they moved toward first class, Lisa felt overwhelmed by the kindness of a complete stranger, but her confusion deepened when she overheard the flight attendant talking quietly to her colleague. "I can't believe we didn't recognize him earlier. one was saying to the other. Did you see his credentials? Who is he? The second flight attendant whispered back. I'm not supposed to say, but let's just say he's someone very important in the Air Force, high-ranking, the kind of person who usually flies on government planes, not commercial flights. Lisa's steps slowed. Air Force? High-ranking? She glanced back at the man who was still sitting in their old seats, now reading his book peacefully. He looked so ordinary, so normal. But thinking back to how he'd handled those troublemakers, she began to understand that there was much more to him than met the eye. First class was like entering a different world. The seats were huge with plenty of legroom and personal screens for entertainment. Danny couldn't stop touching everything, amazed by the luxury of it all. Mom, this is like being on a spaceship, he whispered excitedly. Lisa tried to enjoy the upgrade, but her mind kept wandering back to their mysterious seat companion, an Air Force officer. That explained his calm confidence, his natural authority, the way he'd handled the situation without breaking a sweat. It also explained why the flight attendants had been so eager to accommodate his request for their upgrade. About an hour later, disaster struck in the form of spilled apple juice. Danny had been trying to be so careful with his drink, but turbulence hit just as he was taking a sip. The juice went everywhere, soaking his shirt and even splashing onto his pants. Oh no, Danny cried, looking mortified. Mom, I'm so sorry. It's okay, sweetie, Lisa said, but her heart sank. This was Danny's only clean shirt for their trip. She'd packed light to save on baggage fees, and now her son would have to meet his grandmother looking like he'd been in a food fight. The flight attendant brought towels and helped clean up the mess, but Danny's shirt was soaked. Lisa was trying to figure out what to do when she saw a familiar figure approaching their seats. It was their former seat companion, carrying what looked like a piece of clothing in his hands. I noticed what happened, he said kindly. I thought Danny might be able to use this. He held out a navy blue jacket. It was clearly high quality with a subtle military precision to its construction. Oh, we couldn't, Lisa protested. That looks expensive. It's just a spare jacket, the man said casually. I always pack an extra. Danny, what do you think? Think it might fit? Danny's eyes went wide as he touched the soft fabric. It's so nice. But what if I mess it up too? Then it gets messed up, the man said with a shrug. Clothes are meant to be worn. Besides, I have a feeling you'll take good care of it. As Danny slipped on the jacket, Lisa noticed something that made her breath catch. When the man reached up to help adjust the collar, his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a watch. But not just any watch. It was clearly military issue, substantial and precise looking. More importantly, she caught a glimpse of some papers sticking out of his pocket. She didn't mean to look, but the word Colonel was clearly visible at the top of one document. Colonel. Her mysterious hero wasn't just any Air Force officer. He was high-ranking, just like the flight attendants had whispered. Suddenly, everything made even more sense. His natural authority, his calm handling of the crisis, the respect he commanded without even trying. Thank you so much, Lisa managed to say, her voice full of emotion. For everything, I don't even know how to begin to thank you. No thanks needed, the colonel said simply. Just take care of each other. And Danny, remember what we talked about. Keep dreaming big. As he turned to go back to his seat, Lisa realized that this chance encounter was about to end. In just another hour, they'd land and probably never see this remarkable man again. She wanted to say something more, to somehow express how much his kindness had meant to them, but words seemed inadequate. Danny, however, had no such hesitation. Colonel, sir, he called out, somehow instinctively knowing the right way to address him. When I become a pilot, I want to be just like you. The man turned back with a genuine smile. I have a feeling you're going to be even better, son, even better. The plane began its descent into Denver, and Lisa felt a mix of emotions washing over her. Relief that they'd made it safely, excitement about seeing her mother, but also sadness that this incredible journey was coming to an end. The past few hours had been like something out of a movie, and she almost couldn't believe it had really happened. Danny was still wearing the colonel's jacket, running his hands over the fabric like it was made of gold. Mom, Do you think I'll really see him again? He asked as they prepared for landing. I don't know, sweetie, Lisa said honestly. But I hope so. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Lisa worked up the courage to approach the colonel one more time. She found him in the aisle, pulling down his carry-on bag with the same calm efficiency he'd shown throughout the flight. Excuse me, she said, her voice a little shaky with nerves. I know I've already thanked you, but I need to say it again. What you did today. I've never experienced anything like that before. The colonel turned to face her, and she saw genuine warmth in his eyes. Lisa, right? He said. And she was touched. That he'd remembered her name from when she'd introduced herself hours earlier. What happened today was just human beings looking out for each other. That's how it should be. But it's not always like that, Lisa said. Most people would have just looked the other way. You didn't have to get involved. Actually, I did, the colonel said firmly. When I see someone being treated unfairly, especially a mother trying to protect her child, I can't just sit there and do nothing. It goes against everything I believe in. Lisa took a deep breath. I know who you are, she said quietly. I mean, I know you're military, high-ranking. The flight attendants mentioned it and I saw your papers. The colonel nodded, not seeming surprised or upset that she'd figured it out. Does that change anything? It explains everything, Lisa said. The way you handled those men, your confidence, the respect everyone shows you automatically. You're used to being in charge, aren't you? I'm used to taking responsibility, the colonel corrected gently. There's a difference. Being in charge is about power. Taking responsibility is about service. As they walked through the jet bridge, together, Lisa found herself opening up to this man in a way she rarely did with strangers. Can I tell you something? Today was the first time in years that I felt like someone had my back. Since Danny's father left, it's just been the two of us against the world. I've gotten used to handling everything on my own. You've done an incredible job, the colonel said sincerely. Danny is a remarkable kid. Polite, curious, brave when it mattered. That doesn't happen by accident, that's good parenting. Lisa felt tears stinging her eyes at the unexpected praise. As a single mother, she constantly worried about whether she was doing enough, whether Danny was missing out by not having a father figure in his life. The truth is, she continued, I worry about him all the time. About whether he'll grow up knowing what a good man looks like, what integrity means. Today, he got to see that firsthand. They reached the baggage claim area, and Lisa realized their time together was really coming to an end. The colonel would go his way, she and Danny would go theirs, and this amazing encounter would become just a memory. But the colonel had other ideas. Lisa, he said, pulling out his wallet and retrieving a business card. I want to give you something. There's a youth aviation program I'm involved with. It's for kids Danny's age who are interested in flying and leadership development. Lisa looked at the card. It was simple but official looking, with government letterhead. I don't understand, she said. It's a mentorship program, the colonel explained. Kids get to learn about aviation, but more importantly, they learn about discipline, respect, goal setting, and character. They work with positive male role models, many of them veterans. The program is completely free, including transportation and meals. Lisa's heart started racing. You think Danny would qualify? I think Danny is exactly the kind of young man this program was designed for, the colonel said with conviction. He's got natural curiosity, he shows respect, and he dreams big. Those are the ingredients for success. Danny, who had been listening to every word, tugged on Lisa's sleeve. Mom, can I do it? Can I learn about planes? Lisa looked down at her son's excited face, then back at the colonel. But why would you do this for us? You barely know us. I know enough, the colonel said simply. I know you're raising a good kid under difficult circumstances. I know Danny has potential that deserves to be nurtured. And I know that sometimes, when the right opportunity comes along, you have to take it. Lisa stared at the business card in her hands. It felt too good to be true, like something that happened to other people but never to her. What would I need to do? Just call the number on the card and mention my name. Tell them we met and that I recommended Danny for the program. They'll take care of everything else. But what if Danny doesn't like it? What if he's not good at it? The colonel smiled. Then he'll have learned something about himself, and that's valuable too. But honestly, I have a feeling he's going to love it. As they waited for their luggage, the colonel told them more about the program. Weekend workshops where kids learned about different aspects of aviation, field trips to air bases and airports, guest speakers who were pilots, mechanics, and air traffic controllers. Most importantly, mentorship relationships with adults who cared about helping young people succeed. The program doesn't just teach kids about flying, the colonel explained. It teaches them about responsibility, teamwork, and believing in themselves. Some of our graduates have gone on to become pilots, but others have become engineers, teachers, business leaders. The aviation part is just the hook. The real goal is helping kids reach their potential. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the generosity of this offer. I need to ask, she said hesitantly. This program, it's really free? No hidden costs? Completely free, the colonel assured her. It's funded by donations and government grants. The only requirement is that participants commit to showing up and doing their best. When their luggage appeared on the carousel, the colonel helped them gather their bags. As they prepared to go their separate ways, Danny looked up at him with serious 8-year-old eyes. Colonel, sir, Danny said formally, clearly having practiced this in his head. Thank you for protecting us today, and thank you for believing in my dream. The colonel knelt down to Danny's level. Son, let me tell you something important. Dreams only come true when you work hard and never give up. But you've got something special inside you. I can see it. Your job is to nurture it and never let anyone tell you it's impossible. I promise I won't give up, Danny said solemnly. I believe you, the colonel said, standing back up. He turned to Lisa. Take care of each other. And call that number. Don't let this opportunity pass by. As they walked toward the exit, Lisa felt like her whole world had shifted. This morning, she'd been a struggling single mother, worried about money and her son's future. Now she had hope she hadn't felt in years. 6 months later, Danny was thriving in the aviation program. His grades had improved dramatically, and he'd developed a confidence Lisa had never seen before. The mentors in the program had become positive male role models, showing him what leadership and integrity looked like in action. Lisa herself had been able to focus more on her career, eventually landing a better job that paid enough for her to quit her second position. The stress that had been crushing her for years began to lift as she watched her son flourish. When she wrote a thank you letter to the colonel, his response was simple but profound. Sometimes we're placed exactly where we need to be to help each other. Danny always had the potential for greatness. He just needed someone to believe in him and show him the way. The chance encounter on that airplane had changed their lives in ways Lisa never could have imagined. What started as the worst flight of her life had become the beginning of the best chapter of their story. Danny learned that heroes don't always wear capes, and Lisa discovered that sometimes, when you least expect it, guardian angels appear in the most ordinary places. As Danny often told people when sharing his story, the colonel didn't just save us that day. He showed us that one person really can make a difference, and someday when I'm a pilot, I want to be that person for someone else.